Well, God certainly wastes no time. I've been an ordained deacon for only about 23 hours, and already he has me preaching on what the great theologian William Barclay called one of the most difficult passages to interpret in the whole of Matthew's Gospel. It's difficult because a quick reading does make it sound harsh and exclusive. If your brother sins against you, Jesus tells us, and won't listen to you, or to other witnesses, or even to the church, then treat him as you would a Gentile or a tax collector. Now, that sounds really hard-hearted until you remember how Jesus himself treated tax collectors and Gentiles, joining them for dinner, talking with them, healing them. And remember, the authors of two of the four Gospels were Matthew, a tax collector, and Luke, a Gentile. So the bottom line of this gospel is really positive. Even those we might think are the most stubborn, the most hopeless evildoers, tax collectors and Gentiles, are not beyond hope, not beyond redemption. Reach out to them. The gospel that comes before this one in Matthew is about the shepherd who leaves his 99 sheep to seek and find the 100th sheep that has been lost. The gospel that comes after it is about forgiving an offending brother not just once, not just 7 times, but 77 times, meaning really unlimited times. So God's bottom line in these Gospels is forgiveness, reconciliation. What is ours? Well, God has news for you, delivered today by Ezekiel and St. Paul, as well as by Jesus. Finding the lost, saving the sinners, forgiving the wrongdoers is your job, my job. Ezekiel, whose phrase, Son of Man, was a favorite of Jesus in his preaching, teaches us in the first reading that each of us is God's watchman on this earth, warning the wicked lest they perish. And in today's gospel acclamation, St. Paul emphasizes our personal responsibility for others, explaining God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. So, we are God's watchmen, according to Ezekiel, and we are entrusted with the message of reconciliation, according to St. Paul. That sounds complicated, but it's not. In today's second reading, Paul lists God's commandments and assures us that the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, he explains, are summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no evil to the neighbor, St. Paul continues. Hence, love is the fulfillment of the law. Paul believed that Christians should never sue one another in a court of law. He says to have lawsuits at all with one another is a defeat for you. I always stop when I read that line. I was a headmaster in Vermont for 15 years, and education in Vermont is nothing if not litigious, and it's lawsuit after lawsuit. And I'll tell you, 3 years after retirement, I can still tell you from memory that the school's lawyer's phone number is 802-223-0581. I don't even need speed dial. But I'm sure St. Paul would urge us not to call that number. I'm sure he would urge us not to launch a mean-spirited text message, tweet, Facebook posting, or other social media attack to settle a score. No. Jesus gives us a different way to resolve conflict, to deliver that message of reconciliation that God has entrusted to us. Go and talk to your brother one-on-one, face-to-face, in Jesus' words, between you and him alone. It might not work. And Jesus tells his Jewish audience and us what to do if it doesn't work, following the Jewish laws in Deuteronomy. But notice, and this is a parishioner approached me during the break between Masses to talk about this. Notice that Jesus tells us to talk to him about his error. We are not to attack our brother personally. We talk to him about his error. The first lesson in Catholic moral theology is never, ever, ever judge another human being. That's the first thing the deacon candidates and their spouses were taught by Professor Dan Daly at St. Anselm in moral theology. Never, ever, ever judge another. We can clearly see that some actions, some of those errors, are destructive and dangerous, physically, socially, and morally. But only God knows the state of a person's soul. And God never gives up on us. Our role is patiently, gently, lovingly, and persistently helping our brothers and sisters, including them and reconciling them, welcoming them back into God's family, no matter where they have been or what they have done, leaving the judging of souls up to an infinitely loving and merciful God. Almost 100 of you studied the Old Testament with John Gehagen and me this past winter, learning that salvation history is the history of God's reuniting his children as a family, patiently working with us through Adam, through Noah, through Abraham, through Moses, through David, and finally and infinitely through Jesus Christ. One way to understand salvation history is that evil scatters while good gathers, that evil divides while good unites. We can certainly see the divisions, the scattering in our world today. It's easy to feel with some justification that our brothers are sinning against us, locally and globally, politically and economically, individually and socially. As Christians, though, we are the bearers of God's message of reconciliation. It is up to us to include, to recover, to forgive, and to love our brothers and sisters, regardless of their religion, their political party, their zip code, their nationality, their tax bracket, or other differences. I do want to add just one other thought. These past 5 years of deacon formation have been really demanding. First, as I commuted alone twice a week from northern Vermont to Manchester for class, and then later twice a week with Linda from Wolfboro. Canon Law, Christology, Moral Theology 1, Moral Theology 2, Church History, the Prophets, so many other courses, not to mention 2 separate days of psychological evaluation with a team of psychiatrists from Silver Spring, Maryland. Father is still wondering how I got through that. But he also admits he probably himself would not get through that. I don't even know how many retreats we had, practice homily sessions, and internship projects. At times, it seemed a very, very heavy load to carry. But my wife was with me for most of those classes. Now, how she got better grades than I did in church history and the letters of Paul, I'll never know. I mean, really, who gets a 100 on an essay assignment? She does. And I had that going for me. And Father Cole is widely regarded by the other deacons as like the poster child for the deacon program. There's no other parish that is as committed to the diaconal formation programs and diaconal service in the parish than ours. We have, of course, Deacon Charlie. We have now Deacon Candidate Hilton, who's now Deacon Candidate, or Deacon Rick. And we have Deacon Candidate Chris Conley. So we have more happening here in diaconal service, I think, than almost probably any other parish right now. And Father Wegman, too, has been a great mentor, advising me in how to vest. You know, you're never supposed to wear khakis or boat shoes, but how to vest, how to preach, how to cook, what car to buy, all those things. He's been a great life coach. And my family, some of whom are here today, they've been very supportive as well. But the big surprise for me has been the enthusiasm, the encouragement, even the love that I sense from the St. Catherine Drexel community. Now, you know, Catholic Christianity is communal worship. It's not private prayer in isolation. Remember that idea. Good gathers, evil scatters. And the good has welcomed me and mine into the warm heart of this parish family. You should have seen it yesterday. Somebody said, well, that ordination, that was like a wedding. You know, people were crying. And we were all dressed up in nice white gowns, too, but people were crying. But then walking out, it wasn't so much a wedding as it was like after a football victory, which I know Michigan has had recently, Notre Dame did not. But after a football victory, we were all walking out and people are going, woohoo! I did not expect that. You, as a parish, as a community, have practiced what Jesus and Paul and Ezekiel preach in today's readings, advising me, correcting me, and including me in the life of this Christian community. I thank God and I thank you for this vital support. Please keep me in your prayers. You will certainly be in mine. Thank you.
At this time, as a fellow minister of the Word, the altar, and charity, I'd like to welcome Deacon Rick and his wife Linda to the permanent diaconate.